Hello, everybody. This is Two Way, and this is Two Way Tonight, and I'm Mark Halperin, and you are the Two Way community, and I'm very glad to have you here. It's a magical merger of two amazing things. We got, on the one hand, five or six incredible news stories that I'm so excited to talk about with you, and extraordinary guests who are tailor-made for these topics. We're extremely lucky. We're fortunate. We're blessed. Hardy would call it hap. It's incredible. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the news, and then I'm going to bring in our first two guests. We have three guests tonight. Larry O'Connor, radio host extraordinaire. Nomi Konst, Democratic strategist. And then a little later in the program, Orin Cass of American Compass will be here to talk about his exciting new book about American conservatives. The news. We got news about the family of the Boulder man. Courts are blocking their deportation. We got news about Putin. We got news about Karine Jean-Pierre and her new book. We got news about Elon Musk and Donald Trump and reconciliation. And then we got news about a fella goes by the name of Rahm Israel Emanuel, who continues to do media to test the waters for a possible presidential campaign. So we'll talk about all that, and then we'll very gladly take your questions and comments here on the Two Way channel. If you're watching on Two Way itself, please raise your hand if you'd like to be in on the conversation on any topic you wish. And if you're watching elsewhere, like say, for instance, on YouTube or on X, don't raise your hand and do not put a single syllable of smack in the chat. Please do not do that. This is not like a WMAL hate fest, which Larry would normally preside over, where points are given for the most negative things that can be said.
Wow.
Larry's alter ego.
How dare you, sir?
Hateful Larry.
Yeah, I'll have you know, Mark Halperin, I used to, Nomi was a regular guest on my program during the 2016 election.
Yeah.
We got along well. There's some things we agree on. Was that Nomiki? Did you ever have any hate when you came on WMAL?
Recall, but I've received so much hate over the years that it all just blurs together at this point.
Yeah,
that's fair.
On the right, the left, you name
that's
it.
Fair. Okay.
No, don't take this the wrong way. Are you a little bit more dolled up than usual for this episode?
No, I'm in Arizona, so you might be getting the sunlight just like it's hitting at an angle.
Yeah. Because there's a big debate tonight. I thought maybe you were going to the big New York City mayoral debate. What with your interest in New York City mayors?
I will.
Yeah, it's an important job. Some say it's the second most powerful job in America.
It is. It's what is the fourth largest economy?
Yeah, and biggest police force, both per capita and absolute numbers. Larry, we got an army here.
Oh yeah.
Our police force is like the size of like the next 7 combined.
Oh, I know. It's incredible. You know, I lived in New York and then I had to move to LA from New York. And it was remarkable, the lack of police presence in Los Angeles.
Exactly. There are more police in Columbus Circle on any given day than in all of Los Angeles.
Pretty much.
They're all from Long Island. That's the funniest part. None of them actually live in New York City.
All right. Here's my favorite question about security in New York. How much does New York City spend on Homeland Security? How much? What's the annual budget?
You mean out of the city budget?
Out of the city budget. How much? Say again?
Can you phone a friend?
Sure. I bet he knows. How much you think it is? How much do we spend on like surveillance? And we got New York City cops stationed in like Saudi Arabia, like all over the world. How much you think we spend?
I couldn't begin. You know what? This feels like a Mark Halperin
give me a number.
Gotcha trick question. I say they spend nothing because it's all underwritten since
no,
by the federal government.
Nope, it's a real number. How much you think?
Right.
You both make a guess. The show is stalled.
Can I do percentage of the budget?
Nope. I want an absolute number.
I'm going to guess 50 million.
50 million. Good guess. Nomi.
I'm going to say 200 million.
200 million. Also good guess. Greatest city in the world, $1 billion.
Wow.
We spend $1 billion protecting, 5 tiny boroughs.
That's stunning.
It's mostly for, all right, last New York City trivia question. What do they call the Staten Island ferry in Staten Island?
The ferry.
Well, yeah, but they call it the Manhattan ferry.
Oh, there you go.
Right? because
that's nice.
That's
sure.
what they when they take it, they're going to Manhattan.
Sure. It's like, what do they call Chinese food in China?
Just exactly. Food.
Or
exactly.
wings in Buffalo, where I grew up. I get really angry. People call them buffalo wings. I'm like, no, they're wings.
They're just wings. Yeah. We could play this game forever. Again, if you want to be on the conversation, raise your hand. Thank you both for joining. I'm just going to go in the order they're written here, but I really could lead with any of 5 different things. Here we go. Number 1, the judge, a judge in Colorado, blocked the Trump administration from deporting the family of the alleged firebomber. I said this earlier today, but Nomi, one of the things I learned from Michael Duffy, who was my boss at Time Magazine, sell anything you got good at least 3 times. There's 2 types of people in America. There are people who say, this guy who's accused of firebombing people has a family who's here illegally, deport him, get him out of here. And then there's people who say, well, we need some due process, and how sympathetic are the children, and are they close to the guy? Like, ask a lot of questions. Let's get a process going. Those are the 2 types of people in America. Nomi, which type are you?
Due process.
Due process. Tell us why.
Well, I think that, it's a slippery slope and it's all subjective. First off, yes, on the this seems very clear, but we also understand that the justice system is very complicated. And, who's to say there might be a curveball in this? I don't think so personally, but I do believe that we have a constitution and we should use it and apply it across the board.
All right, Larry, which school are you in?
Oh, guess. We have a constitution. That's true.
It's not for people here illegally.
It is not, and it's not a suicide pact. This is a ridiculous conversation to have. In fact, due process is happening. We're watching what the due process is, which is they are here by the good graces of the State Department. They are not citizens. If we choose to deport them because they're affiliated with a heinous criminal, we can deport them. That's always been the law. It's always been the process. And this judge is completely out of line. Politically, though, this is deadly for Democrats because they have to own this. This is their policy writ large.
So here's why I love both the two-way platform and the boths of you. You both gave lovely short answers that are passionate and principled, and you couldn't disagree more. So let's
we're going to go drinking later.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just have this out a little bit more. Nomi, just on the politics of it, do you agree with Larry that your position is not popular with the American people, or you think your position is more popular?
Well, I think that if it comes down to respecting the Constitution, I think that's tremendously popular, and it's all how the Democrats frame it. I think if we get caught in a Republican set of messaging framing, then we're stuck. But that's the problem with Democrats, is instead of coming up with your own messaging and going out there and convincing America as to why this is a slippery slope, just as Guantanamo was when we were rounding up people with the Patriot Act. I mean, it's just Patriot Act all over again. This is a bad situation. There's always going to be one bad situation that the Republicans are going to use to blanket every other situation and use as an excuse for everything. That's, again, they're weaponizing the Constitution. So the Democrats need to come out with the right message, go out there and campaign on it, and show that Republicans are using this as a way to put fear in the eyes of everyday Americans, just as they are when they're pulling people off the streets that have tattoos of bands and saying that they're members of some sort of cartel. That's not true. There's no evidence there. But again, we have to champion our own narrative. You guys are doing a great job. I'll give that to you.
All right, I'm going to file my nails and do some shopping on Fresh Direct. Larry, you just have at it with Nomi. Go ahead.
I welcome the Democrat strategy of campaighting on this. In fact, I may even donate to the cause. This is absolutely what you should rally around for the next election. And while we're at it, though, I think that they should point out specifically the part of the Constitution that grants Article 3 judicial process rights to people who are in the country illegally, who, by the way, overstayed their welcome, were here illegally for quite some time until the Biden administration inexplicably gave the patriarch of the family a work visa. And of course, the work involved coming up with Molotov cocktails to incinerate innocent Jews, including a Holocaust survivor on a sidewalk in Boulder, Colorado. That's nowhere in the Constitution. They do not have the constitutional right that you have invented here. And if you want to run on the slippery slope argument, I think we're looking at a sweep in 28.
Yeah. So, Larry, you know that historically, up until this administration, the courts have been pretty clear that there are some due process rights afforded people who are in this country illegally. They don't have zero due process rights, right? So the question is, how much do they have?
Well, I think that they have determined that most of those rights fall under the Article 2 courts, which are administrative courts
Yeah.
run through the Department of Homeland Security. And that due process really amounts to this. Excuse me, sir, did you enter or stay in the country illegally? Yes, I did. Thank you. You are now deported. That's the due process. And that's what's involved here. And by the way, even if you are in the country legally, if you're affiliated with known terrorists, and I'm pretty sure the family is affiliated with a known terrorist at this point, they can be deported immediately.
Would you count sharing a Netflix account as a close bond?
No, Hulu,
No.
yes, though,
Yes.
because
All right.
you got to protect only murders in the building at all costs.
I'm going to give you one hypothetical, and then we're going to move on because we got four or five other things. Here's the hypothetical. This guy is the accused has the exact same immigration status as is true that he had, and he's standing on the corner during that event, and he just starts screaming at them from the river to the sea, and down with Jews, and Palestine forever. If you were an advisor to Marco Rubio, and he said, I've seen a live feed of this guy screaming this stuff. I know what his immigration status is. I'm going to deport him right now. Would you say no? Don't do that.
If I were an advisor to Marco Rubio,
Yeah. Would you say?
I would be doing exactly what Republicans are doing. I mean, they're very good at
No.
this.
I'm saying doing the right thing, not the politics. If in other words, would you feel comfortable deporting that guy if he came on your radar and you found out his immigration status, and you came on your radar by shouting things hostile to Israel and to Jews? Would you deport him, or would you say, nah, he can stay even though he's here illegally?
I think, again, it's complicated, and this is one of those situations in which obviously this is deplorable. This is a horrible situation. I just want to say this over and over again.
Yeah.
This guy, if he is convicted, which he's probably going to be, he's a madman and he is a terrorist. But right now, that is before we got to that point.
But I'm taking away the violence. I'm just saying, in America in 2025, if you worked at the State Department, right, and he's here illegally and he's shouting these things, would you say, Mr. Secretary, don't deport him?
Yes, I would say that, because that's spilling over into college campuses. And, and again, it's subjective based on what you believe from the river to the sea means. I have my own beliefs. You have your own beliefs. And I'm sure that there are people on college campuses.
But again, he's here illegally.
19 years old.
He's here illegally.
Okay, well, there might be the same situation at a college campus where somebody's outstayed their student visa, and they might be on, it might be a month after the semester ends and they're still there and they have to get a plane ticket back or whatever. There's always there's always going to be some exception to the rule. But again, once you go with that path, where does it end? And Marco Rubio is playing politics, short-term politics. He's not thinking long-term. He's not thinking, when he's president, he's put in the same situation and he has a much more progressive country and it's not a MAGA country, or vice versa. This is about human lives.
It's a country of laws. It's a country.
Yes,
this is not MAGA.
You it on your political agenda.
No, it's not. No, that's the whole point. We've got to get politics out of this. You're injecting your political agenda in this. We're a country of laws.
I don't believe what this guy said. I don't believe with these kids doing the same thing. But I still
in the country illegally. He is breaking our laws and he's undermining our national security. He is to be deported.
This is what you guys said after the Iraq War, right? It's the same thing. It's 2.0. You're always looking for a new excuse to pull away from the Constitution and use terrorism or what you believe.
Still searching for that part of the Constitution.
Nomi, what constitutional right does someone here illegally have to stay in the United States?
Well, there's a difference between deporting somebody because it's true that they have stayed here, that there's proof and evidence that they have been in this country, beyond their visa, and they have a process, and that is a very normal process that people go through. I'm sure we all know people who've gone through this in some way. And then there's whether or not you have a right here as a visitor, as a resident, as somebody who's overstayed their visa, to say things under the lens of free speech. And you guys are morphing these things together.
Just to be clear, Larry and I would deport them if he said nothing. Like we don't need that extra.
Which is yeah.
Well, here's what else,
because that's the law. And if you don't like the law, change the law. It's a beautiful thing.
Larry, you can just say no further questions, Your Honor. And Nomi, please don't take this as condescending, because it's meant to be the opposite. I am so impressed with your fidelity to finding the right balance between national security and civil liberties and the rule of law and human rights. I think it is nothing short of brave to stick to the principles of this when you know full well you're on the wrong side, not just of the politics of this, but of public opinion. Because after 9/11, too few people in this country spoke up and said, the government lies during war, and we cannot do something like the Patriot Act that cashiers our fidelity to civil liberties just because we're in a national crisis. And so I'm very grateful to you for representing the point of view. That's all heartfelt and sincere. And here's the gag kicker. And your party will go down to a massive defeat if they echo what you're saying, because that position is just not popular. Civil liberties often aren't popular, but I think what we've seen in the last 6 months or so is that the country does not believe in some sort of basket of civil liberties for people here illegally. Just don't believe in it.
I agree with you, but I also think, and I know this is slightly unpopular, but if you really look at the top 3 issues people are voting on and the margins of the loss of Kamala Harris in those 7 swing states, it wasn't on civil liberties, and it wasn't even on immigration. I think it had to do with, the economy. That's pretty much it. And did she show up?
I really think more of it than you do is on civil liberties. I mean, on the border,
on border security,
and the border, and
law and order.
Well, I think it's on competence. First of all, it's on wanting a secure border. Second, it's on competence, and third, it's on understanding the American people. The failure of Joe Biden to ever express outrage about the open border, people just said that guy's not. And same with Kamala Harris. Those two are not understanding what we feel about our country. So,
but look, I'm in Arizona right now, right?
Yeah.
So I'm 45 minutes from the border, right?
Yeah.
Right where I am right now. And this is a city, Tucson, Arizona, where I am, is blue as you can get.
Yeah.
Ruben Gallego was elected U.S. Senator.
Yeah.
This is a place that actually deeply understands the border issues and simultaneously has a movement that talks about this all day long. It doesn't work. I don't think at the end of the day, that is a top 4 issue. I think it is something that's in the media. I think the polling says that people care about it. But when it comes down to voting and looking at those margins, that little margin wasn't voting on immigration. That little margin was voting on, did Kamala Harris feel my pain and the economy? And she didn't show up. Like, that's it.
Larry and I respectfully disagree with you.
I'm torn between wanting to win the argument versus wanting every Democrat to listen to Nomi and follow her lead on this. Because...
All right. After the Ukrainian topic issue 2, after the Ukrainian drone attack on Russian nuclear bombers, the conventional wisdom was shot in the arm for Ukrainians, demonstrated there's a lot of fight left in them, demonstrated ingenuity, will encourage support from the U.S. and Europe to say, okay, game on, we're not, if Putin won't settle, we'll beat him. But today, things took a different turn. President Trump had an hour-ish long phone call with Putin, and number 3, please. Number 3, the president of the United States reports that Putin said to him that he plans to retaliate against Ukraine's drone attack. Mr. Trump did not say whether he tried to dissuade Mr. Putin. Here's how Donald Trump, who remains off camera, reported on Truth Social his phone call with Putin. Number 5. I love when the president does his own readouts on a social media platform that Nomi has probably never been on. This is long. I just finished speaking by telephone with Putin. The call lasted approximately 1 hour and 15 minutes. We discussed the attack on Russia's docked airplanes by Ukraine and also various other attacks that have been taking place by both sides. It was a good conversation with a murderous dictator. He didn't say that, but not a conversation that will lead to immediate peace. President Putin did say, and very strongly, that he will have to respond to the recent attacks on the airfield. Then he talks about how to talk to Iran. Larry, this seems very ominous because Putin has been indiscriminately killing civilians regularly throughout the war, and I don't know that he's held back in air attacks throughout Ukraine. So that part's ominous, and it obviously makes us unlikely to be anywhere near a settlement. But to me, it's also ominous that the president of the United States, with a long history of saying flattering things about Putin, didn't say in his readout of the call. And of course, as the New York Times said, of course I told Putin, don't do that. You've done enough. I've been unhappy with your attack. So How ominous do you find this to be,
Well,
Larry?
I'm not reading into just the fact that he didn't say, I told him not to do that. If Trump did tell him not to do that and he put publicly that he told him not to do it and Putin did it anyway, that's not good for President Trump and for his position as our
Well,
president.
so okay,
I think
okay,
that's why he didn't say
okay,
it.
I take your point, but the matter-of-fact language he used to describe what Putin said, I find disturbing.
It is ominous. Oh, I'm not disagreeing with you that it's ominous. I wouldn't read in that it means Trump didn't dissuade him. I just think he doesn't want to reveal one way or the other. Yeah, this is I mean, it's not getting any better over there. And as cool and Tom Clancy like as the drone attack on the bombers were, it certainly didn't advance the notion of peace, and it didn't compel Putin. I don't know what Zelensky was thinking in terms of whether this would actually force the issue of peace. I think Zelensky's play here, as I said the other day on the morning meeting, was to try to stay relevant in a war posture so that he can rally more support from Europe and potentially compel more money coming from the United States. And with this commander-in-chief, I don't think that check is coming. I don't think those armaments are coming. So it does not look good right now. And Putin is who Putin is. Of course he's going to retaliate. We didn't need to hear that from a readout from Donald Trump's conversation with him. Everybody knows he's going to retaliate, and it's going to be ugly, and there's going to be more death. It's awful. The only hopeful thing today is that the Pope had a conversation with Putin, and I'm praying that that does something.
Nomi.
Hear you. I mean, but let's also remember Putin's army is not as strong as maybe the American media likes to portray. It's a fairly weak army. They're running out of resources. They're relying on North Korean soldiers who don't want to be there and aren't invested in the cause. And Ukrainians are extremely invested in the cause. It's a righteous issue, as it is for much of Europe, by the way. The people of Europe, I think, are very much pro Ukraine on this issue. So, if I were Zelensky, I think I'd be pretty sure that money won't be coming from the United States anytime soon. But listen, it is a win that, at least publicly, who knows what's actually happening internally, that Donald Trump is calling out Putin. I mean, who knows if that's some sort of smoke and mirrors exercise.
I don't know if he called him out. I
No,
think
he's been challenging. I think he's been calling him out.
I think it's folly to underestimate Putin and Russia's willingness to stay in this, their ability to keep fighting, and the number of bodies they can just throw at the front lines, whether they're their own or North Korea's.
100% agree. But what I'm saying is they're not emotionally invested. The soldiers are not emotionally invested the way that Ukrainian soldiers are. I mean, it's even if China's backing Putin, even if there's some sort of, that's all great, but that's like putting, to use campaign terms, it's like having a momentum campaign with a bunch of volunteers ready to, go out there and do everything, like Zoran Mandami right now, and Andrew Cuomo's campaign, which is just buying $20 million ads and not showing up anywhere. There's a difference. Like when you're part of something that you believe in, that makes, you can't wear that down. I mean, they're exhausted.
Oh, I have no doubt this will go on for years if both sides have their way, I think. And neither of them are going to win, or I don't even know what winning looks like at this point for either side. I think the only thing that we can pray for in terms of what might undermine Russia's willingness to stay in this is the global price of gas and oil just cratering and basically, defunding the war effort in Russia, and their economy starts to tank. Right. That was the Reagan strategy, and that needs to be the strategy here.
Well, we're far away from that, it appears. All right. Nomi, do you know who Norm Crosby is? The comedian? You ever heard of Norm Crosby? You're too young. So Norm Crosby is a comedian, and he was big on malapropisms.
Malaprops, yeah.
Malaprops. And I went to high school with a friend of mine in high school, who also unintentionally did malaprops. And she would always say, something happened out of the blues. She would say it happened out of the blues. So out of the blues today, former Biden White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, announced she's written a book that's coming out in a few months called Independent. And this is of great interest to people in media, politics, publishing. If you go to a Green Bay diner tomorrow and you ask everyone who passes through the door, what do you think of KJP's book? You'll get a lot of blank looks. This is not a story that anyone else would be interested in. But in our world,
oh yeah,
this is a fascinating story. So here she is. This is number 7, announcing her book on a platform known as Instagram.
Hi, I'm Karine Jean-Pierre, and I am the author of a new book that's coming out this fall called Independent. It's coming out on October 21st, so please, please do grab it. And the reason I wrote this book, coming out of the White House, you know, serving as White House press secretary was an honor and a privilege. But since I have left, the people that come up to me, strangers that come up to me just across the country as I'm traveling, and sometimes right in my neighborhood, at a grocery store, supermarket, airport, my daughter's school, the number one question they ask me is, Karine, how do we get out of this? How do we protect our democracy? How do we protect vulnerable communities among us? What do we do next? Because we don't have answers here. That's what they ask me. And this is my answer. And what I mean by that is, in an era of misinformation, disinformation, the regressiveness of social policy, what we're seeing currently right now, what I have decided to do, and I really have thought long and hard about this, is to follow my own compass. And that's what I've done. And that's what this book does. And here's the truth. And here's how I will lay it out to you. I think we need to stop thinking in boxes and think outside.
All right, enough of this.
And not be so partisan.
Come on, let her cook, Mark. Let her cook.
I'm keeping a running list. I have so much about to say about this, but I'll let you guys go first. Just tell me two of your thoughts about it. The reaction from a lot of Democrats, both on the record and background and on social media, has been withering for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
Larry, just tell me two things you think about this.
Two quick things. This is why people hate Washington, D.C. This person was the star quarterback, the head cheerleader, and the play-by-play announcer for the destruction of the Democrat Party, frankly, by lying blatantly, being the worst press secretary we've ever had, and by lying to the American people about what was going on in what now she calls a broken White House. But she worked right up until the last day and cashed that check. That's item number one. Item number two, Mark, does she have a constituency? What a stupid move to say I'm not a Democrat anymore. The only thing she could have hoped for was cover from loyal Democrats who might want to, help her out. But now she's on an island.
You don't see her as a modern day Ross Perot, is what you're saying.
Hardly.
Okay. Nomi, 2 points about the book, please.
It's a thankless job, so I will give her that. And I think she got a lot of heat because of the administration she was in, being a woman, a lesbian, a Black Haitian lesbian. So let's be aware that some of the commentary I think being thrown at her as being the worst press secretary. Come on, spare me.
Oh, come on. That what you just described was the most interesting thing about her. Nomi, honest. Okay, all right.
Okay?
Second point. Second
you can
point.
Attack what's happening, and then you can actually be real. With that being said, I've seen this happen on the left quite a bit over the last few years, where I think she comes out of the left, out of my end of the left before she joined the White House. I think there are a lot of folks who came out of the progressive left, joined the Biden administration, can't go back to the progressive left because they're seen as sellouts. The Biden administration, has a branding issue right now. She's not really welcomed in parts of the Democratic circles. And I've seen a lot of progressives go into this independent lane that's just very anti-establishment. It's okay, well, where were you when we were all fighting those fights, I don't know, 8 years ago with the Clintons or 4 years ago. So it does seem like a branding exercise. I don't know if she's going to sell that many books. She might, but regardless of that, I think this is going to turn into an online show. And I'm concerned because, listen, this if anything right now, the Democratic Party needs to get their act together. And it just seems like there's lots of branding opportunities for key Democrats to go out there and lay their plan out for running for president in a few years.
All right, I'm sorry. Here are my two things. First of all, there's no doubt that part of the heat she got was because she's not a white man. Anyone who would argue against that is ridiculous. But I would argue that had she been a white man, she would have been laughed at as the worst White House press secretary in years. She was horrible at the job. She shouldn't have accepted it when she was offered. She should have had the self-awareness to say, I'm just not qualified to do this job. And the people who offered her the job, including the president, should be ashamed for themselves and apologize to her for asking her to take a job she was patently not qualified for. Okay. And I will say, I see in the press coverage today, lots of news organizations writing, well, she was in over her head, right? And quoting people saying that. You will not find that because they all protected her when she was the press secretary. They rarely wrote about it. And the drama that they all knew about with what's his name? The national security guy.
Jake Sullivan?
No.
John Kirby.
John Kirby.
Oh, John Kirby.
John Kirby, who she wouldn't let brief, although sometimes he did, because she couldn't do the national security briefings. Again, I'm not saying she's a bad person. I'm not saying she's not qualified for any job. She's not qualified for the job she had. And And today, just as the press is suddenly saying what was apparent to everyone, that Joe Biden had too much of a loss of cognitive decline to be president. Now they're happy to say that, covered it up the whole administration. Same thing with her. Now they're happy to say, well, lots of people didn't think she was up for the job. Back then, they acted like she was Mike McCurry and Ari Fleischer rolled into one. I mean, it is shameful. And I would love to know how many books they're printing, because they're going to be returning almost all of them. I can't imagine who the constituency is, as you said.
Can I just say one extra thing?
Of course.
If we can, I don't know if there's a way to zoom in on that book cover. It is like,
It's
I feel
awful.
like it's straight out of the, no offense to the right wing, but I feel like it's straight out of the right wing book covers of like the 2000s era.
I think it's AI generated. It's artless is what it is. And it's like a stereotype of what you would do for a book like this. You're right about that. Although I would just, two things I'd take issue with. You may be right that she got a lot of criticism because she was not a white man. I also think she got a lot of excuses made for her because she was not a white man. And so that probably offsets. And I don't think it's a thankless job, Nomiki, because her predecessor is a primetime star on a cable news network right now.
Yeah.
So it wasn't thankless for her.
Again, I've been offered jobs in my life that I wasn't qualified for. And you know what I did? I turned them down.
Oh, look at you.
Turned them down.
And I thought you would have made a great starting center for the New York Knicks.
Exactly.
That was what I was offered. Okay.
Okay. You guys know Oren? Either of you know Oren?
I think so. I not directly, but through many mutual friends in town.
All right. So we're not going to get to day 2 of Musk versus Trump. It's more of the same. President still hasn't reacted. Musk is still on Twitter just trying to kill the bill. And we're not going to see some sound bites from Rahm, unfortunately, because I would always love to get everyone's reaction to Rahm. Maybe we'll have him on the morning meeting, because we want to go to Oren. Oren is here. Oren last night hosted an event, his organization that he founded and for whom he continues to serve, American Compass, a gala. I don't know what the difference between a gala and a reception or a party is, but this is universally called
gala. Is much more elaborate.
More gala. More gala.
Sounds, Mark.
Last night, Oren and his colleagues hosted 2 leading lights of this administration: the National Security Advisor / Secretary of State, and a guy who we call the Veep. Here, no number, but you guys know what I'm asking for. Here is, I believe, Oren with the Vice President of the United States, his pal, J.D. Vance.
There are politicians out there who they've just been politicians. But you are someone who was an intellectual first. Some people don't like the word intellectual, but I mean it in the good sense of the term. You were writing for National Review. You were at the bar late at night arguing about and helping shape these ideas that you are now.
I come here for free and you insult me and you call me an intellectual.
Remind
me that I wrote for National Review. What an asshole this guy is.
That's fair. I will admit that I too wrote for National Review.
Being called an asshole by the sitting Vice President of the United States is something I can only think of occurred to 2 people. Adam Clymer of the New York Times, who Dick Cheney called a major league asshole on an open mic. But
big time.
I believe, big time. But I believe, Oren, you're the only one I know of in American history called an asshole by the sitting vice president on stage, not on a hot mic. So how do you feel about that?
I mean, I feel like back in the Aaron Burr days, it must have happened, perhaps, but
not
with a microphone, not with a hot mic.
Yeah.
No, I think I deserved it. I did in fact call him an intellectual and say he had written for National Review, and I think it's okay. I later in the event I mentioned that he had been an AEI visiting fellow, so I think we're even.
Yeah. So Oren, I want you to describe something that I've talked about a little bit, but I don't know if I talked about it in this program. And it's very similar to what I experienced when George W. Bush became president, which is I knew a bunch of people who knew him when he was like an advisor to his dad and some punk kid, not the governor of Texas, let alone the president. And they all thought it was hilarious that their friend George was now the president of the United States. And even when he was governor. You're one of, I don't know you, I'm meeting you for the first time and delighted to, but I know tons of people like you who've known JD. They don't want to call him anything else for years as like a guy you'd sit in with the bar and a guy who'd call you an asshole. What's it like to have your friend? And again, I'm not trying to elevate your relationship, but I know you know him pretty well, and I know lots of people who know him as well as you, or roughly. What's it like to have your friend be the vice president?
It's certainly disorienting
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. I mean, I think it is a striking feature of our mainstream media that when Barack Obama made a somewhat similar rise to the top of American politics, the hagiography and celebration of it continues to this day. In a lot of ways, I think the vice president's rise is more impressive, and especially because, and this was the point I was trying to make on stage, he's now carrying out a set of ideas that he actually helped develop, and that's so rare in our politics, right? You see even the most talented politicians, they look around and they see whose ideas they like, and they pick them up and they run with them. And so to have somebody who was there at the creation of these ideas, they're actually his ideas in a lot of cases, now be out there, I find it fascinating, and I think it helps to explain why he's such an effective and articulate advocate, why he can go into the long form Sunday morning interview. And, it's the rare Sunday morning interview where you feel bad for the interviewer, because he just, he knows this stuff better. He can argue it better. And so it's a very, I think, unique thing in our politics that we should be very appreciative of.
Yeah, Oren, it's a great point. I'm not as skilled as your colleague Drew Holden is as collecting and bringing the receipts to document egregious examples of liberal media bias. But you're absolutely right that if a Democratic vice president with the biography of J.D. Vance and the extraordinary rise in politics in such a short period of time, and a great explainer of the ideas of his side of the aisle, were now the vice president of the United States, he'd be lionized. And you could read every Washington Post story about J.D. Vance, every New York Times story, even every Wall Street Journal story, and they'd basically be neutral or very negative.
Well, and of course, the Wall Street Journal editorial page, of course, is most negative at all.
Yes, I was including the editorial page in there.
Yeah, I mean, I've been fascinated by, because this is another element of it, of course, where someone like Obama was sort of the epitome and realization of what the entire Democratic apparatus had been trying to do. Vance comes from an insurgent or dissident posture. I mean, he is helping to remake the party, to challenge these institutions, to, whether it's National Review or Wall Street Journal, talk about why they're wrong. And so I think that's it's more powerful in some ways, and it comes. Obviously, I think it's desperately needed.
The other day, I don't think I dreamed this. I think he wrote a letter to the Wall Street Journal. Just like J.D. Vance. I don't know why he wrote it, how he wrote it. His tweets are quite provocative too. Sometimes it's just like you think he's been drinking at late night at the bar with you before he tweeted. But they're all a through line of a piece with the way he's like. Nomi, have you met the vice president?
So I'm trying to think back to.
Besides Kamala Harris, what vice presidents have you met?
Al Gore.
Yeah.
Who else? Biden, of course. I think that's it. I'm trying to think of anybody else. No, that's
no Cheney, no Cheney, no Quayle.
No, I may have met Quayle at one point, but not like it was like an event sort of thing, not like a one-on-one.
Larry.
Interesting question. Thanks for asking.
Okay, Larry and Oren. I know we got limited time, but have you guys met Dick Cheney?
No,
I have not. No.
Pence and Quayle, but not Cheney. No.
I have so many Cheney stories I'd love to tell, and I could hijack the show and do it, but I won't.
I want to go. That's great. Yeah. Let's go.
Oh, he's underrated as a comic.
That'll
comedian.
be two-way plus behind the paywall.
Two-way plus, exactly. Yeah. Oren has edited a new book called The New Conservatives. So let's start simple. Who's this book for?
I guess it's probably for two groups. It is for people on the right of center who are part of this movement, and some of them are new conservatives themselves. Others are sort of looking around and I think very open to and interested in these ideas, but aren't as familiar with them. If you come up through the regular fellowships funded by the regular set of groups and read your Friedrich Hayek and Milton Friedman, you haven't heard a lot about what the actual American tradition of economic policy is. And so it's intended to be something of an alternative for helping people understand what's happening in the party. And then I think the other group is just for everybody else who's looking around saying, what on earth is going on? Why is there a labor union president speaking at the Republican National Convention? Why is there a Republican senator protesting outside a plant that's being closed by a private equity firm? You know, why do you see the attacks on Wall Street? What is this that's going on with trade? Why are we not free traders anymore? And so what we did was we brought together, you know, this is American Compass. The gala was our 5th anniversary gala. We've sort of been at this for 5 years. And so it's a bunch of our best work. It is the best work from others that we've published, all kind of organized and with some hopefully helpful commentary from me to sort of go through what are the actual principles that are being challenged here? How are we thinking differently about markets and the role of government and labor? And then what does that mean in practice, whether it's trade? Why are we talking about industrial policy now, right? Why are we suddenly at war with the universities? And I think it is the best guide out there, both therefore to what is happening right now, and because I think these are the people who are going to be the leader of the right of center for the foreseeable future, I think it's a pretty good blueprint of where we're headed.
American Compass is a rarity in today's Washington. They actually believe in ideas and sifting through and finding the best ones and iterating and developing them. And the left doesn't have as many places like this as they used to. And you all are really interested in ideas. Outside of the Trump administration, who are some of the new conservatives who have interesting ideas? Governors, whoever, who are some people in the book or not who you would highlight to say these are part of the new conservative movement, again, outside the administration?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it has suddenly become a harder question to answer because the administration has brought so many of them in. It's very different. I mean, the first Trump term was very different in that respect.
Right.
And I think one of the things I'm most pleased with about this Trump administration is how aggressively they have made appointments. You know, Rubio at State, obviously Vance, Scott Bessent at Treasury, Jamison Greer at Trade. Stephen Meehan, Council of Economic Advisors, Brendan Carr as FCC chair, Andrew Ferguson as FTC. We could keep going, but so partly I reject the question because these are folks that were not sort of MAGA all along, but now are the Trump administration. I think if you look outside it, there are a few important places. First of all, there is a growing contingent on the Hill. I think obviously Josh Hawley is a great leader on this stuff. Jim Banks, who's recently moved into the Senate. Bernie Moreno has really hit the ground running on a lot of labor and Wall Street related issues. Someone like Riley Moore in the House, who just came in from West Virginia, I think is really excellent. So there are some folks on the Hill, and then I think there are an increasing number of folks at kind of publications and think tanks and so forth. You know, there are some who I would say are definitely need their old their own book called The Old Conservatives, right? Like AEI, Cato Institute, and so forth, Wall Street Journal editorial page, National Review. But if you look at, for instance, what's gone on at the Heritage Foundation, I think Kevin Roberts has really sort of turned that institution much more toward this new thinking on a lot of fronts. I think a place like the Ethics and Public Policy Center, run by Ryan Anderson, has a lot of really great folks there. Henry Olson, who you may know, also writes for Washington Post, fantastic political analyst, is a great example. And so you, I think, increasingly see a lot of established folks who are leaders on this side. And then for me, what is most important, and American Compass is out in people's faces as much as we can be, but a lot of the most important stuff we do is behind the scenes. We have what we call a membership group that's now more than 250 younger policy professionals who are, now there are 3 or 4 dozen in the administration, but they're also LD, legislative directors and chiefs of staff on the Hill. They are the editors, the lawyers, the people who will be the next generation of conservative leaders. And in that group, 90% plus are, I would say, new conservatives. And that makes me very optimistic, but even if you think I'm completely wrong on substance, I think the reality is that this is where American conservatism is going.
Quick comment for me, then a question from Nomi to Oren, and then one from Larry, and then to your questions to the group, whatever you'd like to ask. So please raise your hand. I'll just say 13 years ago, Mitt Romney was a Republican nominee. And then 4 years before that, John McCain. And they couldn't be further away from this set of issues and perspectives. And if you're interested in understanding America and recent American history and the issue agenda that has gotten Donald Trump elected at least twice, you want to read the book because this is one of the most undercovered stories of the last 50 years in American politics, to understand how we went from being a Bush, McCain, Romney party to what we are now. It's just incredible. Nomi, question for the author.
I'm super curious what you think, in a few years, the Josh Hawley versus Vance dynamic is going to be like. Are those two wings? Are they going to combine? I imagine the egos must be pretty big there, and who's gonna make it?
It's a great question. I think there obviously, and anyone in national politics has a good sized ego. One thing that I've been very encouraged by is the extent to which, at this point at least, there's very much a kind of team player ethos, in part because I think when you come out of an insurgent movement, there's sort of a hang together or hang apart mentality. And so, to this point, I think what you've seen is folks being incredibly supportive of each other. I mean, a great example is even last night at our gala, having both Secretary Rubio and Vice President Vance there. And, I mean, I can just, as a fact, like, they are good friends. Their staffs are good friends. It was very important to them to be making sure they were both in the best possible light and complementary to each other. And so, look, obviously some folks are going to throw their hat in the ring in 2028, and then that will become a contest between them. But one thing that I think is probably the more interesting and important question is, will there be anybody left in the other lane? I mean, will there even be a Nikki Haley who anybody takes seriously as an alternative, or are we just taking for granted that the new conservatives now are the Republican Party, and the question is which of them is going to lead it? I think that's probably right, and I think that's a fantastic place to be. The thing I'm really watching for is how people differ in how they choose to define the coalition, because the old Reagan coalition, right, the free market libertarians, the social conservatives, the neocon foreign policy hawks, that's gone. You have labor coming into the party. You have the sort of Silicon Valley techno-optimist types. You have still the social conservatives. You have the corporate lobby and so forth. You have MAGA. You have MAHA. And so much of national politics is deciding, how do you define your coalition, who gets what, who's in, who's out. And part of what I think we'll see heading into 2028 is people offering different definitions of their version of that. And whoever can put together the version of that is actually most politically powerful is probably the person who's then going to get to lead it.
Oren,
Larry, go ahead.
You're a former Romney guy. We were all Romney guys. We supported Romney, and I thought he was a great candidate for 2012. As the rise of Trump, and more importantly, Trump's ideas and approach, as you so well defined here this evening, as it took hold and became the sort of center of gravity for the conservative movement in the Republican Party, you and the people at American Compass and a couple of other groups like Heritage, they were able to make that shift. They were able to say, okay, this is what we also believe in. We can take this and find this new coalition, make it work and be a part of it. There are others who sort of, put on a MAGA costume for opportunistic purposes because they wanted to be close to power and willed it, but they were never really in on it. And then there were these others who were just absolutely, it's almost like they were never conservatives if you look at what they say now and how they behave. They're literally on the side of the left suddenly. Have you been able to examine that dynamic and try to sort of make sense of it? I'm sorry, maybe I'm naive. I'm still rocked that Bill Kristol is who Bill Kristol is right now.
But Oren, before you answer, I'll just say, Nomi and I are both surprised that Larry just demonstrated an intellectual breadth and depth that would qualify him to be at AEI, the Corey Lewandowski chair. The Corey Lewandowski chair for
Are you trying to ruin my career, Halperin?
Advanced MAGA studies. No, that was very impressive. Very impressive.
No, I love the question, and it is because I think it's connected in my mind to this coalition question. And I mentioned, we have this huge membership group at American Compass. We do a big annual weekend retreat every year, get everybody together. And I try to kind of give some sort of speech on the opening Friday night on where I think things are. And this was my topic, was what has happened as the old coalition broke down and a new one is being built up. And I think what you're seeing in the breakdown of the old coalition is that if you're if you were in the old right for a particular reason and you don't get that thing anymore, then you leave, right? And so some of the neocons, now look, if you go back to the original neocons, right, like Norman Podhoretz, Irving Kristol, like those guys,
the dads.
I am proud to say I have their books on my shelf. if you look at the kind of newer neocons who were more like, oh, well, the Cold War is over, like what other wars can we go start? And the Republican Party was like the vessel for doing that. That's why they were there. I don't think there's a lot of evidence they ever cared a whole lot about any of the social conservatism, certainly. I think they, if anything, were probably holding their noses. Likewise with a lot of the free market libertarians. Well, if this is where I get my free trade and my tax cut, then sure, I'll go along with the other stuff.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's just really fast because the social conservative things that you're right, they did hold your nose. You never thought that George Herbert Walker Bush was, on board with the social conservative issues. But in a weird way, this new shift that aligns us, as you said, with labor and like blue collar Midwestern UAW workers, the people I grew up with in Detroit, that's actually a better fit in the long run.
Yes.
All right. So
I just want to push back a little bit on that.
Go ahead, Nomi. Go ahead.
It's only a little bit of labor. I mean, UAW is voting overwhelmingly progressive right now. I mean, they're unionizing all over the country. They're these big union. They're very clearly identifying the enemy of this tech sector, this Silicon Valley, oppressive movement. So I hear you. I get that there's like a flavor of labor that shows up every once in a while, but it doesn't show up actually in the numbers as we think.
Yeah.
I mean, let's remember that a quarter of the UAW now is grad students, right? The UAW found it couldn't organize, actual blue collar workers anymore. And so organize a bunch of grad students who are, protesting Gaza on college campuses. I think if you survey the actual UAW members who are blue collar workers, they are probably by a substantial margin voting Trump and supportive of the administration. Yeah. One way we know this is there was exactly one union who was willing to actually survey its members and release the results in 2024, and that was the Teamsters. And Teamsters members were for Trump over Harris by 25 or 30 points. Yeah. So I think actually blue collar workers
UAW is overwhelmingly diverse.
What's that?
UAW is very diverse. I mean, we could have a whole union conversation. I don't want to hijack this.
All right. I want to get into one, and I hope 2 questions. We got to end by 7 because I want everybody. This is like a direct order to the extent I have any authority here. I want everybody to switch over and watch Bridget Fettis's show at 7 o'clock. So we're going to end at 6:59. But let's go to Zach. Zach, welcome in. Real snappy. Just tell folks where you are and what's on your mind.
Hi, folks. I'm in Oakland, California. I was thrilled to see that Oren was coming on. Coincidentally, I'm trying to post a video today, and I quote Oren, I quote you in the video talking about how GDP is not a adequate measure of social well-being. We need some more multidimensional account of human flourishing and so on. And I think we agree on that. My question for you is, how do you think we should be thinking about measuring social well-being? And maybe you can touch on things like cost-benefit analysis or whatever else. I think cost-benefit analysis is the mainstream in the government right now.
Thank you, Zach. Oren.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think I would split into 2 parts. One is even just how should we measure economic well-being? Because I think GDP tells us something, but it misses an awful lot. And so on the economic side, even looking more at the distribution of GDP, what is the typical worker earning? Is their productivity rising? Are we seeing that distributed well geographically and so forth? All I think needs to be focused much more along the side of just what is the number. And then I think that what this comes down to is asking what is the ends, not just the means. GDP is not the end unto itself. In theory, we like it because we think it is correlated with things we actually care about. And we can have political debates about that. I think certainly for myself, for a lot of conservatives, it's things like strong families and communities. Are people growing up in a context where they can actually build a good life, get married, have kids, support that family, raise those kids in an environment where they're then ready to go off and do the same themselves, enjoy increasing health, be able to live where they want, be in a community that is capable of providing for most of its needs and having strong social infrastructure. And so, those are all things that we can measure also if we want to. I always point out, we survey 60,000 people every month to get the unemployment rate right to 1/10 of a percentage point. If you surveyed 60,000 people a month on some of these other things, you could have every bit as granular a view of what's going on there. And I think we should.
Zach, thank you. Great question. Our next community member, who just showed up nicely, has achieved something Barack Obama wanted to do but never could, elected to the U.S. House of Representatives from the state of Illinois. Congressman Lipinski, great to see you. Question for Oren or Larry or Nomi.
Oren, great to see you. We've been on the same side of these things for a long time. Not the GDP, it's the JOB, as one of my Democratic colleagues used to say back about 15 years ago. But my concern right now is that the Trump administration is not really carrying out this policy of working to, bring American, I won't say bring American jobs back home. I mean, that to some extent, but we need to grow our manufacturing. I'm concerned that the Trump administration on this and on other issues, they're doing things that I'm very happy to see, things I fought for 16 years in Congress, but not going about it in a smart way. If we're going to really take on China, we need to be building our alliances with other countries, not going after them economically in other ways at the same time. Do you have those concerns right now that the types of policies that you have been talking about for years, some of them are finally getting implemented, but they're not being done in a way that is the most advantageous way, the most effective way?
Great question. Oren.
Yeah, I think there's some very fair points there. At American Compass, we've been quite critical of some of the specifics of the Trump administration's implementation. Even as we say, we think the goal, the thing they're trying to fix is exactly right. The direction they're going is exactly right. I think a lot of trying to, bring back manufacturing, build a stronger economy is about sort of stability and certainty. If you want people to invest in the United States, the question isn't what's the tariff tomorrow. The question is what's the tariff going to be in 3 years, in 5 years. And so I think, you've already seen over the last couple of months some, I think, very good course corrections toward a clearer, more stable path forward. But certainly that's something important and something that I would give them less than full marks on from the beginning. I guess I'm a little bit more sympathetic to the idea that we need to pick some fights with our friends. And what really brought me around to that, I actually ended up, coincidentally, long ago, I'd committed to traveling to Canada and then to Japan shortly after inauguration and talking with policymakers and economists there. And the extent to which they simply did not believe anything was wrong in the global system, did not believe anything was going to change, was stunning to me. Especially in Japan, where their view was essentially just, well, of course, we're just going to keep doing business with China. And why would you be so crazy as to suggest anything else? And so I do think the analogy I've used is the idea of kind of the burn the boats example, that I think until the Trump administration, until the United States as a policy matter makes clear that this post-Cold War model of just unquestioned free trade, America absorbs all the deficits, or while other countries' surpluses are deficit, America takes on all the security costs. Until the rest of the world actually really truly believes that is over, they are not going to make some of the changes that they need to make. Us just asking nicely isn't going to do it. And so I think the current model where the administration does not have the tariffs on, but has a credible threat of them and is saying, we need to negotiate, we need to find a better arrangement. I think that's the right model.
Yeah, Oren, thank you. Congressman, thank you. I'm sorry we got to end just because we're up against the hard stop, but thank you for joining. Oren's new book that he edited, did you write a word of it or just edited it?
It's a lot of my stuff too. So
you didn't just find spelling errors.
No, many of the words are mine, but more importantly, I got to choose all of the other fantastic contributions that I thought needed to be in there.
All right. It's called The New Conservatives. I think we've demonstrated this man is not an asshole, despite what the vice president says. Seems very nice. And the book's available now. We're grateful to you for joining. We hope you'll come back. Drew's on a lot. I don't know why you shouldn't be on a lot.
Would love to. Thank you for having me.
And I'm sorry we didn't get more questions in, but we're up against the clock. Again, right now, turn over to watch Bridget show. Again, if you're not familiar with Bridget, she's a genius. You'll want to watch. Very grateful to Larry and Nomi for coming back. We hope you'll come back on a regular basis. We love having you on. We love having you on together. And we're grateful to you all watching. Don't forget, next up, my interview with Jim Banks and David Ignatius. And then tomorrow, the morning meeting. And I'll be back here in 23 hours. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you.